Okay, hello and welcome back to the discussion series here on the generative landscape. We're joined today by Apolinario, who is now a ML art engineer, I believe is your title, at Hugging Face, but also the person behind multimodal.art and a number of open source tools like Mind's Eye and Majesty Diffusion. Apolinario, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, so for those of you joining at a later date, just to put this in context, we are currently in this very crazy phase where Stable Diffusion came out maybe 6 weeks ago. Lots of other new models, modalities, and so on are being announced every day. And so, what I'm hoping to chat today a little bit about is just how on earth we keep on top of this kind of fire hose of information. But maybe before we even get into that, could you tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up, working in this space and so on?
Definitely, yeah. So essentially, I liked generative art or generative media since a very long time, like with procedurally generated environments and for games. Even in like, I've always liked it, even when I was a teenager, like this procedurally generated games from the 80s, where each time you would go into the game, it's a different dungeon, always like sometimes like they were randomized, right? So there was nothing super fancy going on, but I like the idea that every time you go somewhere, it's something different. So this was a passion of mine that is old, and I made a career where I mixed a bit of like creativity and art with technology. So I studied computer science and I studied communications. Now I always worked in the intersection of this. So I've worked on advertisement and communication agencies, and then I worked as a product head of product. So always combining the communication strategy part with the technology side. Because to be honest, I'm not like the greatest programmer, but I think I can like connect the dots and work in one layer of abstraction higher to think about these things. So this was my background. I also like my undergrad thesis was about creative computation, so computational creativity. So I've always had an eye on this thing. And then since the DALI 1 blog post, which was January 2021, I was obsessed about the idea that you could produce images from text. Like I think the DALI 1 was really a transformative paradigm shift, and even in people's heads, right? That this was even something that was possible and that you could do with quality, right?
Yeah.
Like you can do. It's something that didn't exist, still exists, and it works really well, which is not common, right? Usually you start very incrementally. So that got me and a community excited about this tech and this role. And from that, I have developed further, and then I started jumping into the field. I was very early in this communities about replicating DALI 1, and then there were these people hooking up Clip with VQGAN and other GANs, and then Clip with diffusion, and I was part of this community. And then I felt the same thing that you said, like how the hell will I keep up with that? And then I saw, well, we have a bunch of Colab notebooks, we have talented programmers in the open source community, we have these companies like OpenAI, but what we don't have is information being organized, structured. So I thought, well, maybe that's a space that hasn't been filled yet, and I think this field is going to grow bigger and bigger as we're seeing it growing. So I started 1 year ago with multimodal art, essentially with this idea of being like kind of a news portal, information organizational process. I also have a plan to, maybe when you're seeing this, it's already out, so I'm announcing firsthand here, have like a wiki and other tools that build up on like basically, yeah, information organization, news, and news from not like taking the tech news and talking about this, but like coming from the space and then talking about this with more knowledge and with interesting discussions philosophically with artists. So the idea, yeah, is to be like a communication and information organizational medium in this field that is ever changing to help other people keep up as well.
Yeah, excellent. I think we both very much seeing the same thing, at slightly different like focuses. But yeah, you've definitely become the source that I point people to when they say, "How on earth do you find out about all of this stuff that's going on?" And I really appreciate that like desire, right? Because this whole thing is, well, you've got this amazing tech, but if only a few like coders can use it, that's one thing, you know. So getting it out to the people, making like I know you really inspired me back when we were playing around with, you know, VQGAN and Clip. It was all like messing around in code and editing these different notebooks. And so then you came up with this thing called Mind's Eye, which was just like almost a precursor to a lot of the Hugging Face demos and things that you see people sharing now. Here's a text box, here's some drop downs, very like user friendly way to access these models. And that just opens it up to a whole lot more people, which is, yeah, extremely positive. Okay, excellent. So yeah, really, really glad to see that. So in terms of like that news curation and things then, besides just following multimodal art, do you have other tips for people who are trying to like figure out, you know, what's new or what's coming, or yeah, how do you stay on track with that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few processes that maybe I also am looking into like automating and putting into the website as well. So there are lots of ideas cooking, but usually actually like I go into GitHub and I search for like clip, diffusion, some like key terms to see like what are the new repos that are coming. I'm also joining some communities on Discord. There is a Luther, Lion, and actually after Stable Diffusion, a lot of new communities exploded, and each one of them had like this little nuggets of information. And then of course things go into Reddit. And one thing that I think it's really interesting is that I consider what I do like a meta curation, because other people are doing other curations and then I aggregate other curations, right? So it's like there's a list of all Stable Diffusion applications on Reddit, and then there is a list of awesome Stable Diffusion on GitHub, and then I go there and I do this meta curation of the curation. So I think it's a bit if you really want to dive deep there, that those are the places that you want to go. But I do think that what I want to help people is just offload cognitively. Like, oh, I just received this newsletter. If they want, right, to like keep track, yeah. But if they want to be in the source of the things, yeah, I think it's keeping up with Reddit, Discord, GitHub, talking to people, talking to the authors. Like I reach out to a bunch of authors and they tell me what is next, and I maybe help them assemble demos and things like that. So it's a bit challenging, but I think more and more it's gonna, like, more and more layers of abstraction are building so people can have the information without needing to spend too much time into following up. But if they want to do that, it's a lot of fun. So I would not discourage.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. Well, you're doing that for us and saving us the rabbit hole to some extent. And I kind of think of it similar to how, you know, AK on Twitter is great, but he's just browsing archive every day, so that we don't have to. Okay.
Exactly.
Excellent. Yeah.
And then whatever he tweets, people build on top. Like even I, for example, I wouldn't do what he's doing because it would be a bit wasteful, but he tweets like the things, and then I try to, like, for example, my latest thread from when we're recording this was about this new paper submissions for this event next year. And then, yeah, AK tweeted a bunch of papers, and then I made a thread kind of organizing and explaining, and yeah, so I think there are different layers of abstraction of information organization that are forming this community that are pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Really great to see. Excellent. Okay, so that's some tips for keeping up. The other thing I was very curious to talk to you about is just your actual day-to-day work, because besides just sharing the, you know, latest news of what's happening, you're also there with Hugging Face, and I know especially the last, let's say, couple of months with DALI Mini going viral and then Stable Diffusion being released, it must have been quite exciting to say the least behind the scenes. So yeah, if you have any kind of stories from the trenches as to how these big rollouts of these kind of viral models have gone?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think besides keeping up with things, even before I joined Hugging Face, I was also thinking of how to make this technology more accessible to people. So that's where Mind's Eye that you mentioned before came from, where it's a UI that would assemble a lot of the models in one place. Also, I worked with Dango for Majesty Diffusion, which was like the state of the art of open source for a little bit of time. before bigger models were out. And yeah, I think this experience on both organizing information and building things made sense for me to join Hugging Face to focus on this vertical of art and creativity. And yeah, I think what for my day-to-day job, essentially what I do is not that much different from what I described on Keeping Up, with the difference that I feel empowered by the team and by the organization to bring these people in. So whenever there's a new author, I can chat with them, see if we can help them provide more impact, setting up demos for them, seeing if they what they need. And also internally within Hugging Face, I think the goal is to make sure the platform supports use cases for art and creativity. So it's essentially, I work with the team from Gradio, for example, to make sure that whatever we do work for, so whatever Gradio does works for art and creativity use cases, and vice versa. The same with the open source teams like the diffusers library. So I work quite horizontally across the organization to make sure both that what we do serves the community for machine learning art and creativity specifically, and also to bring the latest from the community within the organization to see how can we support and bring most impact. And that's the cool thing about working on an open source oriented organization, is that we can work focused on impact, and there are other people worried about making money that is not me.
Yeah, oh, that's really great. And yeah, I am a huge Hugging Face fan. I even made sure to wear my Hugging Face merch to the call just for you.
Oh, can I see
Um,
it?
oh yeah, this was the Hug Gan sprint. Maybe I'll put
Nice.
a better resolution photo in the actual video. But yeah, I really enjoy the kind of community events and focus that the organization has. So great.
Hashtag not an ad.
Yeah. uh, yeah. Anyway, excellent. Then the other thing I wanted to ask you about, so this is now, I mean, you have this long history, right, in this computational creativity and generative space. But if you didn't have that, if you were like a new person joining now, I'm curious if you have any kind of recommendations for, how might you get involved? Would you, try and invent a new technique straight away? Or is it more like, let me create a new demo for an existing tool or make a notebook? What would you recommend as like a kind of jumping in point for someone who's got some tech but maybe new to the generative space?
Right. I think I always would recommend people to follow what excites them the most, which is a pretty generic thing to say. But essentially, what I mean is, for example, if you join, like everyone would have a motivation on why they're joining this course that they are watching this video for, right? And then it would be, yeah, many people would have different views. And oh, I joined because I thought joined because I work in machine learning, or I'm an artist that codes, and I was afraid that this technology would become necessary for my job. So whatever that is, I feel that um, I think, yeah, trying to understand deeply what you enjoy for fun, if that's something you'd like to do, right? If you're understanding deeply something you'd like, or assembling. One thing that I feel that sometimes is not that much explored, but what I really liked about your course, and I did the previous version of this course as well. I took it; it's really good. Was that there are different levels of things. For example, most of my takeaways from those courses were actually at the end, where I could like assemble pipelines and build things on top. So for example, as I said, I work usually more on this layer of abstraction up. So one thing that I would recommend people, so yeah, of course, you have to understand how it works under the hood, but being realistic, it's unlikely that people doing these courses will like be training state-of-the-art models with 256 A100 GPUs or Age 100 GPUs or whatever that is. Maybe you are. Some of you will, and I am excited for that. But I think the majority of the people will not have this amount of GPUs at their disposal. But what they can do is understand how the models work and potentially pipeline together, because more and more models are open source, more and more applications are coming out. But I think that this organizing it on a code perspective, like building blocks and with libraries like diffusers and other libraries that essentially try to modularize these applications, and then setting up, understanding how it works under the hood to be able to modularize it well yourself. I think that would be very impactful, and maybe that's how new applications would come. Even if you don't train a new model, you pipeline two, three things together that no one thought. You apply the technique from a new paper in an old model that works. And I think that those are points where everyone can jump in once they have the fundamentals.
Yeah, for sure, and not just jump in, but make significant contributions, right? Without having to, yeah, like you said, do everything from scratch. I like that. That's some excellent advice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think that's pretty much everything I was hoping to cover. Is there anything else you'd like to chat about, or any final words you'd like to, leave with the people watching?
I would like to thank you for the opportunity, and to say welcome to the people taking the course into this generative space. I don't know if you're coming here from curiosity, from necessity, because you feel this is the future, but I think this is a very exciting space. I think this technology has the potential to really transform how society deals with art, creativity, and many other fields. I think we're in the brink of a new uh, creative revolution that I think is precedented only to the invention of the digital media, computers themselves. And we're seeing a new explosion on that very soon will enable everyone to create. Like we can already see how um, Stable Diffusion will be on anyone's phones or whatever iterations of. And now with the video, text to video, we can see how all the gifs in our phones are going to be turned into something we generate right by the instant. And of course, those are just anecdotal things. But yeah, I think this is the future. There is going to be, because this is a big thing that is going to be the future. I think there's going to be a lot of BS around this too. So I think I would say brace yourselves for that, because I see like some movement of this becoming the new crypto for VCs, which is good. If we have injection of capital in this space, this will grow exponentially, but also be careful, because probably the the crypto bros that were trying to not do cool applications which exist will are also migrating to this field. So yeah, be careful, but jump in, and doing this. You're doing this right by taking this course that is technical and really understanding it. So yeah,
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for that, and that's a brilliant place to end. We'll see you next time for the next discussion.